Hi everyone, Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle in Billings, Montana. In this video I'm going to show you how to tie a parachute Adams. A parachute type of fly is a very valuable fly during a mayfly emergence when the fish are taking the emergers right underneath the surface film. The difference in a parachute fly is that it sits with the body of the fly right in the water, so it looks like an emerger. And you can always tell when fish are taking emergers. There's lots of swirls and lots of bulges, but there's no breaking of the surface. You don't see an air bubble after the rise, which is an indication that they're taking a fly on the top. This is compared to a conventionally tied Catskill style Adams, where the fly actually sits on its tail and its hackle tips. This fly's body is above the water. When the fish are actively taking the duns on the surface, then it's time to switch to a conventional Adams type of a tie. So the only difference in tying a parachute Adams versus other mayflies is that it requires both a brown and a grizzly hackle tied both on at the same time and wrapped. Now the problem with using brown hackle and grizzly, particularly a rich brown, is that the brown is so dark that it can overwhelm and the grizzly won't show. So what I actually use instead is a barred dark ginger. So I have right now a size 14, 1x long, standard dry fly hook. I'm going to start the thread. This is for the parachute at about the 75% point on the hook, and wrap a smooth thread base all the way to the end of the shank. Now typically on an Adams you use a combination of brown and grizzly hackle fibers for the tail. I'm going to cheat a little bit and use one of our new products here from Whiting. It's the CDL hen neck. This is actually a grizzly variant, and the reason I picked it is because it has both grizzly and nice brown tones. Being CDL, of course, it's all spade type of fibers, so it's excellent tailing material. Simply going to remove one of the bigger feathers here. You can see the beautiful markings on this. These are also an excellent value. So I'm just going to select the hackles here near the middle of the feather that are fairly stiff, and take about a dozen of them or so. Get the tips even and pull it off. I'm going to measure this tail to be hook shank in length. It's important for the balance of the fly to have this properly tied, so hook shank in length. Take one soft wrap on my side and then bring the tail material up with a firm wrap up on top. And then we'll wrap over this tail material to about the 60% point and clip off the butt ends. I'm using 14-aught Vivus thread here, gray. Continue to wrap my thread forward behind the eye and bring it back to the 75% point. Again, this is important for the balance of the fly. For my posts, I like to use mcfly. It's a nice polypropylene material. I also add a few strands of pearl crystal flash into my post. You can see it here. It really makes this fly much more visible at distance. And I straighten out the mcfly material with a dubbing needle to make sure all the fibers are untangled. Then I melt the end of it, as you see here. This way I can use this for several posts and I'm not losing materials as I go along. So I'm simply going to cut off about 1.5 inches or so from the unburned end. Again, that way I preserve the integrity of the rest of it. And to make this thread strong and tight, I'm going to spin it clockwise. A common problem with people who tie parachute posts is they try to use too much material. The more material you use, the harder it is to get this wrapped tightly on the hook shank, and it's critical to have your post tight. So we're going to lay this at the 75% point, wrap 2 tight wraps, one over the top of the other, and then I'm going to swing this wing material a little bit and sneak a wrap in going the other way. This makes an X wrap. And I'll get these 2 wings and pull them tightly. That helps to consolidate that thread because we want all these thread wraps to stack one on top of the other. I made another wrap in that direction, and then I'm going to make a pair of X wraps, again keeping it as tight as the thread will allow. And then these X wraps, you can use it to incorporate your wing materials on each side of the hook. End up with the thread at the beginning edge of the far-sided wing. Now I'm going to combine these two halves. Everything that I do on the post itself will be counterclockwise as you look down from the top. And you'll see this is very important in the tie-off. So I'm simply going to reach around and bring my thread counterclockwise right around the base of the post, right above the shank. I'm going to make 3 wraps here. That's the first one. Each wrap, as I go around, I hold the wing and I snug that thread up. That's number 2. And then this is number 3. And then when I come in front of the post, I make a wrap in a conventional direction around the shank, and that locks that in. So right now we have the 2 sides of the wing combined into one post. Now I'm going to post the actual material itself, again by wrapping counterclockwise when viewed from the top, with touching thread wraps as I go up the post. You want to keep these thread wraps as smooth as possible. Every time I bring the thread around forward, I grab the post and I tighten my thread. You'd be amazed at how solid this makes this post. And I'm going to go up a little farther than normal since I have 2 hackles to wrap, but this is adequate. And then I'm going to continue to wrap, going back down the post with touching wraps. The smoother this post is, the smoother the hackle will wrap. When I get down to the very bottom of the post, I again make another wrap in a conventional direction right in front of the post. So now we're going to select a dark barred ginger hackle of the correct size for this hook and a grizzly hackle. I'm simply going to place these 2 feathers, marry them front to back so they're nice and smooth. Which way they're put on doesn't make any difference. We'll get the butts evened up here, and then I'm going to strip off some fibers. I want enough bare shank that when I tie it in, that I have enough bare shank going up the post that my first turn of hackle is actually bare shank and not hackle. This keeps the hackle from flaring upwards. This information is all available in Charlie Craven's book. I thank Charlie for this method. It's superb. The easiest method I've found for making really tight parachute flies. Now it's important that the shiny side of the feather is toward you. I'm going to tie this on my side of the hook shank, right behind the eye, wrap forward to behind the eye, then wrap thread back. Now when I get up against the post, I'm going to stand these feathers up with the inside, the dull edge of the feather against the post, and make a couple of oblique wraps around the post to force those against the post. And it's critical that the inside of these feathers be facing the post, because as you see when we hackle it, we're actually going to bend these back 90 degrees so that the hackle fibers fan upwards. So now we're going to simply post the hackle against the post. When you've done this a few times, you can actually post the post and the hackle at the same time, so it's a step saver. So now I'm simply again going to wrap my thread counterclockwise on the post. The first couple of wraps, I want to make sure that my hackles stay oriented correctly with their inside edges against the post. And we'll wrap nice smooth thread wraps all the way up to where we ended before, and then return them down. And these hackles are standard length. They're 1.5 times hook gap. I've read other tires, they say, well, you have to use hackle on a parachute that's 2 times hook gap, which I think is ridiculous. The fly is being supported by the length of the hackle, so I don't see why you would need bigger hackle to do the job. So after I've wrapped the post, I made a wrap in front on the hook itself in a conventional manner. Now I'm bringing the thread behind the post. Now the abdomen material can be one of two things. You can simply use Adams Gray superfine dubbing, which is fine. I prefer to use a goose buyout. I think the effect is more natural and it's more durable. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to build up the shape of my abdomen a little bit as a natural mayfly, kind of a carrot shape, a little heavier towards the post and thinner at the back. Make sure you don't trap your post materials as you do this. You don't want to overdo this silhouette, but I do like to broaden it up just a little bit. Makes the fly a little meatier, a little more tempting. And then I'm going to flatten the thread here for the last wrap to smooth it down. Simply rotate your thread counterclockwise. And Vivas does not flatten as well as something like UTC, but it does flatten. And it makes for a nice smooth underbody. You will have the occasional post material that's problematic, but you'll get past it. Alright, so I'm going to make my final wrap towards the tail butts, but I'm going to stop about one wrap in front of the tail butts themselves. Now I'm using a gray turkey buyout. The reason I'm using a turkey buyout is on a size 14 and larger hook, you need the length of the turkey buyout to have enough to wrap. On a size 16 and smaller, a goose buyout is just fine for length. All buyouts have a hard ridge on one edge and a softer ridge on the other. The actual buyout is oriented on the leading edge of the primary feather, like so. So the hard edge is always on top. Now if I wrap this with the hard edge at the back of every wrap, I'll have a nice ribbed body. If I wrap it where the hard edge comes forward with every wrap, I'll have a smooth body. So I'm going to want a smooth body on this fly, and you'll see the effects as I wrap it. I'm just going to tie in some of the tip on my side of the hook, capture it with a soft wrap, and then continue forward with your thread, tie in the tip of the buyout, and this is also another chance to smooth out your abdomen. Then I'm going to use some very thin head cement here on the thread itself to help strengthen this buyout and to make the fly more durable. Now I simply get the end of the buyout, my hackled pliers here, and make sure you've got it oriented correctly. You'll know at the first wrap if you goofed up because of the way that rib stands. So my first wrap is like so. I don't know if you can see it on the film, but there's a very small ridge there, and that's because of that hard leading edge. Wrapping it this way, however, I can cover up that ridge with each wrap. If I turned this buyout 180 degrees when I tied it in and wrapped it, this hard edge would be following with every wrap, and you would have a nicely segmented body. I'm going to wrap this buyout until I'm in front of the post. Make a soft thread wrap to really bunch that buyout against the hook shank. Another wrap to wrap it down good. And then cut off the butt closely. So hopefully you can see this is a nice, smooth, segmented body. I think it's very attractive. It's also extremely durable. Then I'm going to take one or two thread wraps going backwards to make sure I have that buyout secured. Now we're going to cover our thread wraps and make a bit of a thorax here with just UV2 Adams dubbing. I really like this dubbing. It's very fine and it dubs well. And I'm basically just covering the thread, not much more than that. So I'll dub a few inches of it here. And then I'm going to make some X wraps around this post, forward and back, again to build up this thorax material. This is the largest area on a mayfly. It's where the legs and the wings and the musculature for them are all attached. I wrap in front of the post, and I'm going to wrap towards the eye just a little bit. And you see I'm adding a little dubbing here. You'll see where this is important in the final tie-off. And you want your thread to be hanging right in front of your post. So I'll take the first hackle here, the dart bark ginger, and I have folded it backwards so that as I wrap it, the actual hackle fibers stand upwards like an upside down parachute. You want to make sure you haven't trapped any of your post materials, and I'm only going to make about 3 wraps here. And then I want this to hang on my side of the hook and down. This is important for the tie-off. As you can see, I'm using another set of hackle pliers now to wrap the grizzly, which I'll do identically as I did with the brown. Make sure that the hackle fibers are pointing up, and I'm simply going to wrap in between the wraps of the brown. And I actually like to put in 1 extra wrap of grizzly, again so that the brown doesn't overwhelm it. Then when I get to the shank of the fly, I let this hang as well. Now to tie this off, you bring your thread straight up and around the base of the post counterclockwise, just like you wrap the hackle. There's 2 wraps, then a 3rd wrap around, and you can see where that dubbing came in handy. It helped to keep that hackle against the post, and then as I bring it towards the eye, I also don't have any bare thread over my previously dubbed head. Now don't cut your hackles off yet, but you can take your pliers off. Now if you look at this fly, you can see how these hackles are folding upwards. And the nice thing about this versus a conventional tie is that when you go to whip finish, take your turn slowly, and these hackle fibers will kick up and out of your way. Instead of trying to whip finish on the post itself, which is about impossible and it makes for a very ugly fly, this way that all the hackle is tight and it's pointing up. When I've got that wrapped, then I can come back in here with just the tips of my scissors and cut off the remaining hackle. The last thing I do is I cut my post material to, I like it about the same height as the height of my hackle. And then finally I'm going to use this extra thin head cement again and put a small drop right at the top of the post where the hackle is wrapped in. This will soak into the post, soak into the hackle stems themselves. So the hackle is wrapped, it's tied, and it's also glued. Then just a little dab of head cement here underneath the eye for the thread. And there you have it. A very nice looking parachute Adams. It's America's most popular dry fly. And like I say, the parachute style is very valuable at the beginning of the hatch when the fish are taking these emergers right underneath the surface. You can make the post any color you want. I've tied them out of pink, green, and even dark dun mcfly lawn. It just depends on the water conditions and your ability to see the fly. So that's the parachute Adams. Thanks for joining in. If you have any questions or comments, as always, please don't hesitate to contact us. I'll see you next time.